Welcome everybody, it's Mark with exoticcarplayplace. Thanks for stopping by, and today we're going to get rolling and talk about the E60 M5, what makes it so special from the standard 5 Series BMWs, but really we're going to hone in on the suspension bits. We know there's a ton of information on the S85 engine that make this car spectacular. We also know that the SMG3 transmission is very unique and was created with a 7 speeds for this particular car to match up perfectly to the power band of that S85 engine. But what we don't talk about typically are a lot of the other features. And we're going to get to some other factors here in other videos, but today we're going to focus in on the suspension setup. Why is this car so different? And how is it so different from a standard 5 Series when from the top of it, it doesn't look that much differently from a regular 5 Series BMW of the E60 variety, but there are differences, and we're going to talk about that today. So first I have to share that it actually does share the general aluminum McPherson strut multi-link suspension that you would typically find associated with the standard E60s as well as the M5 E60. But not only is that is not where the beginning and end of this suspension discussion happens. There's a lot of other things that are going on under the skin. And so we start talking about the modified front subframe and thrust plate. There are some parts that are unique to this car. The subframe obviously is to support some of the additional rigidity or create additional rigidity for the extra, the strength in the chassis that you're looking for a high performance car. You don't need it in a 530, but you do need it in an M5. If you want to compete at the world level of performance cars, you have to have that increased. You have to increase the strength of the chassis overall, as well as support for that monstrously powerful V10 motor that sits in the front. Hey, have you ever seen a very powerful muscle car when you rev the engine and you see the chassis twist every time you rev that engine? Well, I've got friends that have cars like that, and what actually ends up kind of happening at times is you punch the throttle, you twist, and next thing you know, parts are breaking apart. I've seen that. I've had friends with situations like that with extremely powerful big block Chevy motors, and it starts tearing the car apart. Anyway, back to reality here. We're talking about the BMW. So that's the first part that's different in addition to a standard 5 Series. In addition, the next point is it actually has a wider front track by about 0.9 inches. It doesn't sound like a whole lot, but 0.9 inches coupled with the fact that it's got fatter tires on the front gives it a much wider overall stance. And of course, all that's basically hugged in those beautiful sculpted front fenders, which are also additional add-ons for the E60 M5. Now there's also there's a revised geometry of the suspension setup on both the front and the rear of these cars. You need different geometry when you're lowering a car, when you're trying to create extra rigidity in the suspension. Compliance, yet you also want something that's going to hold up in the corners, and it's not going to be wallowy, it's not going to let you down in those aggressive twists in the corners. You want it to absorb, but not too much. So you've got changed geometry in the front and rear suspension. As well, in addition to that, you can also expect to find stiffer bushings all the way around. Stiffer suspension bushings are going to mean that there's less flex in the overall suspension. Everything's going to be more rigid. The whole package is going to be stiffer, more rigid, more compliant, but it's also going to be potentially noisier, a more harsh ride. But again, we're talking about performance. You want the stiffer, you want suspension tighter, you don't want flexibility. You don't want to have extra flex necessarily wallowing in that suspension and giving away in there. That's not what you're trying to accomplish. This isn't a large couch driving down the road. This is an M5, and a lot of times you want that performance driving, so they've made little changes like the bushings to increase the stiffness overall of the chassis. Now, here's a good one as well. They've done little things that you can't tell from the outside. Hollow drive shafts. Hollow drive shafts have been a great addition because obviously what does that mean? Less rotating weight. You put big fat heavy rims on there, big heavy brakes, and you start putting heavy rotating equipment on there, you wind up with a car that turns very slowly and acceleration is hampered because of that. Where you can improve on acceleration are things like lightweight clutches, magnesium or aluminum rims, brakes that are either carbon ceramic or cross-drilled where you're losing some of the metallic surface, as well as doing other things like lightening the overall car's weight, as well as the rotating weight of it is reduced by having hollow drive shafts on this car. Now, in addition, another thing that they've done is additional changes to the spring rates. Well, what is a spring rate? The spring rate essentially is the way that the suspension, and I'm not going to get into the full technicalities of it. Ultimately, in layman's terms, it's basically how a car can absorb the changes, the small changes to suspension flex versus the larger impacts, and how those springs can really alter the ride quality at different variances. So if you're talking about really aggressive corners, there's a different rate when you're really putting load on the suspension versus subtle changes when you're hitting little tar patches. Spring rates are gonna improve overall quality of ride on light driving duty, but it's going to also improve your performance handling characteristics. So it also has revised rear suspension links, which more or less were taken from do you remember that beautiful Z8 Roadster they produced many, many moons ago? Well, they've stolen parts out of that parts bin as well from the Z8 Roadster and applied it to this car as well. And in addition, because we talked about the front subframe, they've also got an additional rear subframe tacked into this car too. That's in addition, it's an add-on. It's specifically built for the M5. The rear subframe, again, will provide additional rigidity for better cornering abilities and keeping that overall car stiffness much more aggressive and more capable for performance driving. Now as well, we talk about the anti-roll bars. They're of different sizes as well. And obviously if you know anti-roll bars, depending on what your application, typically you want a stiffer anti-roll bar. Depends on the way you want a car set up, but often it's not always stiffer the better. Sometimes you need a softer anti-roll bar, depending on the type of car you have. If you've got rear weight bias, front weight bias, if you're trying to do certain things like you want more grip in the corners or maybe under acceleration, these kind of factors can all be changed with changing the anti-roll bar stiffness. And these cars have a different anti-roll bar thickness than you would find in the standard E60. And these ones are at the front, 26.5 millimeters at the front and about 18 millimeters on the rears. And then of course, one other key function that is unique to the M5, and if you've seen some of my videos, you'll also recognize it has a button on the dash called EDC, which allows you to alter the dampening of the suspension, which is able to suck up those extra bumps, those extra imperfections, or dial the car's performance or handling characteristics into more of a performance mode, the standard, normal, soft, or of course more of a track sport mode. There's the 3 modes specifically in EDC, and those are called comfort, normal, and sport. Fully customizable, and of course lacking in most of the other E60 varieties of the 5 Series cars. Custom for the M5. So as you can see, everybody, I wanted to summarize some of the key differences under the skin and some of the things that don't get noticed on a regular basis. Some of the things that make this car so damn good. And a lot of it is all in the suspension as well. This car doesn't just go like there's no tomorrow. It actually handles and drives like a supercar as well. And some of these factors that are hidden underneath the skin aren't obvious to the viewer's eye. But I just want to share that with you because I think a lot of these factors get overlooked in these cars. And these cars are truly an engineering marvel. Not just the S85, not just the SMG, which arguably is maybe not their greatest design to date, but it does work, and the gearing is awesome for this car. But there is also a suspension factor that plays a part here too, and I thought I'd bring that to the table because a lot of you guys wonder, what are the differences? Why is it so much different than a 5 Series? What else is going on there? Well, I want to share that with you guys. But guess what? Coming up very soon, there will be another video I will be creating on the specific interior subtleties, the differences that you can find from the M5 versus a standard E60 5 Series car. That will be following very shortly in days to follow, guys. So everybody, I really hope you enjoyed the video. Just wanted to share a little bit more of the knowledge with you guys out there. I know you guys love the M5s. And for those of you who don't, maybe this is a little bit extra information of you guys, for you guys, that don't know what makes this car so capable, I thought I'd share that with you. And so if you're already one of my great subscribers, thanks again everybody for dropping by, checking out the video. Don't forget to share it with your friends. And for those as well out there who haven't subscribed to my channel, you make sure you do. You're going to find tons of great content following, guys. As well as if you like these cars, if you know or if you don't know already, I love the V10 engine. I think there's just a sparkle, something special with that V10 motor. That's why I also own a Lamborghini Gallardo. So if you like any of those cars, you make sure you give that subscribe button a touch, and we'll get talking to you on the next one. Thanks again, everybody, for stopping by. It's Mark checking out with Exotic Car Play Place. Thanks for coming out. Bye-bye.